Hello everybody and welcome to another YouTube video. So in today's video, I'm going to share with you my Shopify interview experience. Now the reason I'm making this video is because Shopify is a really cool company. I actually really enjoyed interviewing there and I would have loved to work there. The only reason I did not was because I took a job offer at Microsoft instead. Now full disclosure and transparency here, both of these positions were intern positions. So I was offered from Shopify a backend developer intern position, and instead I decided to go to Microsoft as a software engineer intern. Now, I'm sure these are pretty well the same things. I mean, the titles are not that relevant, especially for an intern position. But anyways, I really enjoyed my time at Shopify. I was actually there in person. This was probably actually over a year ago that I did these interviews. And well, I just wanted to share my experience in case any of you are considering working there and talk about what I had to go through and how it was different from my interviews at Microsoft and other tech companies. So with that said, let's get into the video after a quick word from our sponsor. Now, even though Shopify didn't give me your typical algorithmic style interview, I still needed to prepare and use AlgoExpert, the sponsor of this video, to do so. AlgoExpert is the best platform to use to prepare for your software engineering interviews, and not only has over 110 coding interview practice questions, but also has something called Systems Expert. Systems Expert teaches the fundamentals of system design with comprehensive video explanations, real code examples, and practice system design questions. It covers all the important concepts you need to know to ace your system design interviews, like caching, proxies, load balancers, hashing, and over 20 more important topics. After mastering these, you can move on to the systems design quiz to test your knowledge, and then head over to the practice system design questions, where you can learn how to design large-scale systems like Google Drive, Netflix, and many others. Get started using AlgoExpert and System Expert by hitting the link in the description and using the code TechWithTim for a discount on the platform. So I'm going to try to keep this video fairly structured. I'm going to talk about the following. So first, the application process. Second, my remote interview. Third, my in-person interview, and finally, my offer. I will try to talk about some details about the offers, like the compensation and the benefits and all of that, but I don't actually have a hard copy of the offer, or I would have attached it to the video and you guys could have looked at it for yourself. But anyways, let's talk about the first thing, which was the application process. So how did I apply to Shopify? How did I actually get these interviews? So first of all, the resume I used to apply, I actually have a video where I went through and kind of reviewed it and talked about it. So I'll leave a link to that video in the description. I'll try to remember to add a card. Someone leave a comment because I almost guarantee you I'll forget to do that. But anyways, you can look at my resume from that video, so I'm not going to discuss that here. But the time that I was applying for this job, this was November 2019. I was in my second year of university, just wrapping up my first semester, and I was looking for an internship in the summer of 2020. So the time you kind of apply for those would have been, like November, October, at least for these kind of big tech companies. So I saw that Shopify was close to me. I was actually located in Ottawa at the current time, and Shopify's home office or headquarters or home base or whatever you call it is located in Ottawa. They're actually a Canadian company, one of the largest Canadian companies, and actually one of the fastest growing ones as well. So I went on the Shopify website. I saw there was a bunch of different positions, and one of the positions that stood out to me was backend developer intern. Now they also had front-end developer intern. They had like software architect. They had like a bunch of other ones as well, all kind of web dev related stuff. And I wasn't that good at web development. I just really was good at Python, to be honest, and like a little bit of front end stuff. So I applied for backend developer. Anyways, it took probably 3 months, 2.5 months, 3 months for them to actually get back to me. So funny story, I applied, just sent my resume in. I had to fill out some information about myself as well. There was some like supplementary thing, nothing crazy, but you had to type in like some paragraphs and answer some questions and stuff, but no coding assessment or exam or anything like that. Anyways, I was actually in Seattle on January 30th when I had my Microsoft interviews. And funny story, about 2 hours after I finished my Microsoft interviews, again, this was before the pandemic when you could travel and all of that, I actually received an email from Shopify saying that I had an interview scheduled 4 days later. So that was fun. I came back from Seattle the next day, and then 3 days later, I had my interview at Shopify. So the first interview was a remote interview, and this is what they called a life story interview. So they said, you don't need to prepare for this at all. There's going to be no coding or technical questions. We're just going to ask you some behavioral questions. We want to get to know you and just see if you'd be a good cultural fit. And that definitely was not a lie. I had my first interview. I don't know what time it was at, but like on February 4th or something like that. And I just got asked a bunch of behavioral questions. The first ones I got asked was kind of, like, what do you like to do in your free time? What are your hobbies? What do you enjoy? Why'd you pick this school? Whatever. How'd you get into coding? And then after kind of the first maybe 20 minutes of just some warming up, nice questions, friendly, get to know you kind of stuff, they started asking me your kind of standard questions like, why do you want this job? How much experience do you have in this programming language, whatever it may be. And I kind of took this as like them trying to filter people out. So they didn't bring too many people to the on-site if they weren't kind of worthy of being there. Now, unfortunately, I can't remember much more about that interview, but I remember it lasted about an hour. It was really casual. Honestly, I had a fun time talking with the person. And then I guess maybe a day later, I received an email that said, hey, we'd love to bring you to on-site interviews. Your scheduled date is this, whatever. So I actually walked to my on-site interview. It wasn't too cold, fortunately, when I went there. And on my on-site interview, I met with 2 developers. So I went to the Shopify office, which is actually really cool. It's in downtown Ottawa. It's in this really big, massive building, and they have like a bunch of different floors on there. I walked in the office, there's like plants everywhere, there's like computers, they have like a lounge, they had like catering, like a bunch of really, the stuff you would expect at a big tech company, essentially. And then I had my interview with the 2 devs. So what they said was I should come prepared with a coding project that I had worked on. They said I didn't have to do anything else, just bring some coding project you had worked on your laptop. The devs are gonna sit with you. You should know the project in and out and just walk them through the project, talk about, like architectural decisions, why you decide to do specific things, how it works, all of that. So fun story, if you wanna actually see the project I worked on, I did a live stream 2 days before I had this interview where I actually did pretty well the entire project. So I'll leave a link to that project or a link to that live stream in the description so you could check it out if you want. But the basis was it was like a little web app where it used sockets and like multiple people could log on and just chat with each other, and it would store all of the message history. Super simple, nothing complex, and like it just used really sockets, sessions, really basic JavaScript, and I think it was like Flask or possibly Django backend. Anyways, you guys can check that out for yourself. So I came in with that project on my laptop. And what I did is I just showed them the project. So the first 30 minutes, there was 2 devs, one who was a senior developer, one who was like a relatively new developer, had worked there for like 2 years. And they kind of just sat behind me, looked at my laptop, and just asked me to walk through the project. They asked me some questions, and I just showed them the code that I wrote. They seemed relatively impressed. And then after probably about 30 minutes, I said, okay, that's great. Now what we want to do is we want to actually ask you a design question. So rather than asking me any technical coding question, which they told me I wouldn't get, they asked me a kind of like object-oriented design problem, or like I don't even know how to describe it, but something where you have to draw out kind of like a UML diagram and talk about how you would design a system, not how I would code out a specific algorithmic problem. So what they said is we're building a store, and what we need is photographers to sell images to a vendor. So people that are using Shopify stores, they want to be able to hire photographers to take, images of their whatever product and then send those images. And anyways, that was kind of the basis of the problem. It was like connecting photographers with Shopify vendors and having them be able to deliver some images of the product. So there's a bunch of requirements with that. I won't get too much into like what I did for that question because it's really hard to explain it without a whiteboard. But they had this massive whiteboard. We were in like a private room, and I just started kind of whiteboarding out the question and drew like a standard UML diagram and kind of what my design and structure might be. I just walked through my solution. They asked me a bunch of questions, they actually corrected me on 1 or 2 small things. We had a good conversation, and that was pretty much it for the interview. Then we had like maybe 5 or 10 minutes left. They asked me, your standard kind of exiting questions like, why do you want this job? What do you think of Shopify? Do you have any questions for us? Blah, 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 whatever it may be. And then that was it. And then I went home, and I guess a few days later or a week later, they sent me the offer. Now, funny story, when they gave me this offer, they didn't actually send me an email with this offer. So me saying sent is actually incorrect. I remember it was like 11 a.m. I think it was a Friday or something. And I received a phone call from an unknown number. So I just picked up the phone and I said, hello, Tim is speaking, whatever. And it was actually someone from Shopify that was calling me. I was really caught off guard, was not prepared for this phone call. But anyways, they just said, hey, how you doing, whatever. And then they told me, hey, we'd like to offer you the job of backend developer. Now, this was kind of sneaky on their part because I had to answer and tell them on the phone pretty much that I wasn't going to accept the job because I was going to take my job offer from Microsoft. But it was a really kind of difficult thing to say to them, right? Because I was on the phone with them, I was talking with someone, I couldn't just send out an easy email and say, thank you for the opportunity, whatever. So anyways, I let them kind of read out the offer before I said anything. And they said, yeah, you know, we're going to pay you, I think it was $33 an hour. There's like $1,000 kind of benefit you get to like build your own little office or like whatever. There was like all these other random benefits kind of like that too. Anyways, they read all that stuff out, and then unfortunately I had to tell them that I wasn't going to be accepting the offer, but that I would love to potentially interview for another term if that was something that was allowed. So anyways, all was good, very respectful, whatever. They were totally fine that I said that. I sent a little follow-up email afterwards saying, you know, thank you for the opportunity. And that was kind of my story interviewing at Shopify. Now, the key takeaways from this was that I didn't have to do a technical coding question. Like, I had to do a design question, but I didn't actually have to answer any like algorithmic problem. In fact, they don't do that at Shopify at all from what those two developers were telling me. They said they'd much rather learn kind of how I think about a system. They want to have more abstract things rather than just potentially like a memorized coding problem that I could go in there and just whip out really quickly. And they wanted to see how I would design the system, because that's what I would be doing on the day-to-day. I would be making decisions like that, of course, with input of other developers. But that was kind of my key takeaway from that, was that they asked me to do a design problem as an intern, where usually I thought you would get like a technical coding question. So that was interesting to me. I wanted to share that with you. And I also just wanted to say that every single person I talked with at Shopify was absolutely amazing. They were super nice. The atmosphere was great. Both of the developers I talked to, I asked them like, why did they want to work at Shopify, or why are they working at Shopify? And they said it's just like a really chill environment. They really enjoy the work. It's super impactful. The company's growing super quickly. And the moral of the story is I would have worked there 100% if it wasn't for the Microsoft offer. So anyways, I hope this story was somewhat interesting. I hope you got some information from this. But that was kind of all I wanted to share. So if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and of course, I will see you in another YouTube video.